Hello again, everyone, and thanks for joining us for another edition of Alaska Weather on this Monday, 8th day of February 2021. I'm Dave Percy, a meteorologist with the National Weather Service, hosting today's show. Up first, cold temperatures this morning over much of interior Alaska with got a few of the colder readings here. 55 below reported at Chakyetzik. There, I don't think I spelled that right, but it's Chakyetzik there, near Fort Yukon, just to the east of Fort Yukon, but 55 degrees below zero there. And Fort Yukon, 53 below. Otherwise, Chicken, Umiat Airfield, one on the north slope and one in the eastern southeast interior there, 52 below zero. And then Eagle and Arctic Village both had 47 below and a lot of minus 40s, mid minus 40s across much of the area, right down into the Copper River Basin. One location had 40 below zero. So from there, we move into wind chill warning out, and that's for the Klondike Highway, including White Pass, and that's from midnight tonight until 9 a.m. Tuesday. And that's for wind chills down to 60 degrees below zero in that stretch of the highway there. Again, the Klondike Highway up to Skagway, and that's out until 9 a.m. Tuesday from midnight tonight. And then there's a wind chill advisory out for some other areas there, the northern panhandle, for wind chills to 30 degrees below zero. And that is for the Haines area. Let's see, Haines and the Haines Highway, expecting those wind chills. And that's from 9 p.m. this evening until noon Tuesday for that area. And from there, we'll move on to the hazardous weather graphic. And you can see red all along the Arctic coast there. That's due to a wind chill warning that's out for this, begins this evening and remains out until, let's see, noon Wednesday for wind chills to 70 degrees below zero at times. So the entire stretch of the Arctic coast, again, from right now until noon Wednesday. So quite a stretch there for that wind chill warning. And the rest of the yellow areas there shaded, those are all for wind chill advisories. And in the case of the eastern North Slope, southeastern Brooks Range, and the eastern central interior, that's for wind chills anywhere from, say, 50 to 60 degrees below zero, around 55 below. And then for the western areas out toward the Seward Peninsula, northwest coast, St. Lawrence Island, and the eastern Norton Sound there, that's for wind chills running anywhere from 45 to 50 degrees below zero. And from there, we'll drop down. Southern southeast coast, a winter storm warning is out for this evening for heavy snow. Already some areas picked up a couple inches, light snow falling at, Klawock. They've had several inches of snow up to Sitka, seen light snow this afternoon and today, and light snow as far north as Petersburg, and Cake also, and Angoon, seen a little bit of light snow. But anyway, the red shaded area of the southern southeast coast, winter storm warning for heavy snow this evening. That should start to let up around midnight or after, but between now and then you could pick up anywhere from 5 to 10 inches of additional snowfall. And that's about it, warning advisory and watch-wise here. On satellite imagery, you can see a couple of three bands of clouds out over the Bering Sea there, one really weakening. One first frontal boundary there, or zone of moisture from the eastern Aleutians right up along the west coast. Cloud spilling into the west coast, mid and higher level cloud associated with that up across St. Lawrence Island, the Bering Strait, and then back along the north and Russian coast. And break behind that from the Pribilofs out to about Adak, and then another, that's a pretty weak band there, not really doing much. And then a little bit stronger system there west of Shimei. You can see the back edge of that front just coming onto the picture in the last frame there. Otherwise, you can see the clouds increasing over the eastern Gulf of Alaska, cold air pushing southward into the northern panhandle. Winds on the increase, 40 to 55 miles per hour for peak wind gusts. Lynn Canal and Glacier Bay area. Eldred Rock seeing peak wind gusts of, 51 miles per hour, or 55 miles out. Cape Spencer, 56 miles an hour. So those winds are coming out and interacting with that moisture that's streaming northward and creating a widespread area of light snow there over the central and southern panhandle. Actually, even some light snow back up toward Yakutat and just off the eastern North Gulf Coast, the clouds, and then begins to clear out there around Prince William Sound. And generally fair over the eastern interior areas with the cold temperatures. Again, the north slope showing up white, as well as portions of the upper Yukon Valley with the cold temperatures there. That this morning were down anywhere close to 40 to 45 below in the greater Fairbanks area over toward Eielson Air Force Base, and even into the Copper River Basin, 25 to 40 degrees below zero this morning. And otherwise, Susitna Valley down to as low as 25 degrees below zero in some areas, from Willow on up toward Talkeetna in those areas. And looking at the chart today, there is some areas of light snow, that first band along the coast there. Otherwise, high pressure behind that. And the other one doesn't really even amount to, the third band doesn't even show up much on the surface map here. But the front pushing into the western Aleutians with gale force winds and precipitation in the form of rain or snow in toward Amchitka Island. And winds starting to come up around Adak. Otherwise, you can see the very tight gradient over the central interior areas into the northern Copper River Basin and North Gulf Coast. And also winds kicking up Matanuska Valley today, seeing winds up the valley there as high as 40 miles an hour out of the northeast and 25 to 35 miles an hour from the northeast into the Wasilla area. And let's see, Thompson Pass had wind gusts to about 55 miles per hour earlier today, and Seward seeing gusts of 35 miles an hour. Even stronger winds over the northern Panhandle, and then snow developing too along the coast and pushing in from about Sitka on eastward there, but not quite making it to the Stewart and Hyder area, at least the last time I looked, and then also increasing moisture there off the eastern North Gulf Coast area. And for tonight, that's actually going to continue to increase and start to pull west-northwestward, and so chances of snow increase for Cordova, and also for the south coast of the Kenai Peninsula, maybe even to the Barren Islands. We'll see possible snow showers by tomorrow morning. But the snow continuing lighter, or the heaviest snow expected this evening for the southern Panhandle, and slowly tapering off. But as you can see, it doesn't end completely for Prince of Wales Island, across Ketchikan, Metlakatla. Snow all night tonight, with the heaviest coming this evening, though. Strong winds in the northern Panhandle. And again, just enough of a breeze in the Arctic coast, especially on the west side there, to keep the wind chill warning going. And then for outlook tomorrow, that front out over the western Aleutians just really goes to pieces as a stronger system pulls in well southwest of Amchitka, close enough to bring some moisture into the western central Aleutians. A little bit of an increase in the wind, nothing too significant. And another system, southeast flow on the increase there, bringing warmer air and rain up to the Alaska Peninsula, maybe the eastern Aleutians. Better chance around Alaska Island than Unmak Island. Otherwise, scattered rain and snow showers in over the southeast Bering Sea, and southeast flow on the increase now. And that'll actually become southerly flow aloft here from the Gulf, or from right across Kodiak Island into the southern Alaska, as the whole pattern reorients itself, where we become on the east or the west side of an upper level ridge. It'll set up to the east of us as opposed to what it's been for the last several days. Otherwise, it stays cold and windy though over the southeast coast, and dry. 1,053 millibar high just to the northeast there of the northern Panhandle, with 1,058 millibar high over the Kenzie River Delta. Otherwise, maybe some flurries possible in the eastern interior, otherwise cold and dry and breezy across much of the remainder of the state. Outlook for Wednesday continues to become warmer and better chance of moisture. Southern Alaska, areas of snow, possibly mixing with rain. Kodiak Island along the outer coastline stays windy and cold over the Panhandle. Cold over the interior, chance of snow on the Arctic coast. Lows for tonight, 0 to 10 below for the northern Panhandle, always lower to mid-teens, all the way down to Dixon Entrance, and 30 to 40, 20 to 40 below Copper River Basin, 10 to 20 below Susitna Valley, 5 to 15 below Copper River for the Kenai Peninsula, 40 to 55 below up over the northern interior, milder on the Arctic coast, single numbers on the southwest coast, 30s elsewhere, and highs for tomorrow, single numbers, Susitna Valley below zero, Copper River Basin, lower teens, south central Alaska, but 27 or upper 20s to lower 30s for the Kenai Peninsula, upper 30s Kodiak Island, quite cold over the Panhandle, highs well below zero north of the Alaska Range, and in the 30s to lower 40s for the eastern Aleutians and Alaska Peninsula. Lows Wednesday morning shaping up like this, still 25 to 30 below for the Copper River Basin and 5 to 10 below for the Susitna Valley, but edging back above zero with the increase in the clouds here and moisture for areas for northern Cook Inlet, Kenai Peninsula. with below zero, 5 to 10 below for the northern panhandle, single numbers all the way down toward Dixon entrance, just below freezing for Kodiak, and another 35 to 55 degree below zero night for the northeast interior and north slope, with minus 15 for St. Lawrence Island, near freezing for the Pribilofs, upper 30s for the lows for the Alaska Peninsula, followed by highs. Back it up here. Pretty cold for the Panhandle, lower 20s, south central Alaska, a little below zero for the Copper River Basin, below zero north of the Alaska Range, 40s out over the Aleutians, Alaska Peninsula.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Looking at our first line weather graphic for tomorrow morning, Tuesday morning, VFR, Arctic coast, Arctic Ocean, all the way down through Cook Inlet and Kenai Peninsula, Prince William Sound, although marginal VFR starting to progress north and northwest onto the south coast of the Kenai Peninsula, across Kodiak Island, and covering all the Gulf of Alaska right up along the North Gulf Coast and along the coast of the Panhandle. Otherwise, some IFR out over the eastern Bering Sea from just south of St. Matthew Island across the Fox Islands, Pribilofs, marginal for the peninsula, and then another band of IFR from Adak to Amchitka northwestward. For the afternoon, that all combines into one huge area of IFR from Shemya and Attu across all the Aleutians, halfway up the Alaska Peninsula, covering the Pribilofs, and then marginal VFR, St. Matthew Island, Nunivak Island, down to Cape Newenham, into the Southwest Mountains, Auckland, Buckland Mountains, and then across Bristol Bay, Kodiak Island marginal, and Kamishak Bay, but Cook Inlet stays VFR, and then we've got marginal VFR now up in across all of Prince William Sound, possibly as far west as Portage. VFR for the Panhandle and the remainder of the state. And then for Wednesday morning, conditions southerly flow starting to take over now, being replaced by the colder flow we've had with the whole weather pattern reorienting itself. So IFR right into the south and southwest interior, Cook Inlet to Prince William Sound, across Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta, and definitely the valley, Kuskokwim Valley, and much of the Bering Sea and the Aleutians, south side of the Alaska Peninsula. Marginal VFR up to the Central Alaska Range there in the Talkeetnas, and staying VFR to the north, VFR over the Panhandle. And then for Wednesday afternoon, good VFR holds from the Arctic coast, although see some IFR showing up there just north of Point Barrow, but still a fair distance off the coast. Everywhere else, VFR down to St. Lawrence Island. Eastern Norton Sound now picking up the marginal VFR and up the Yukon River Valley there, almost to the southern Kobuk Valley. But for the most part, the northeast interior and eastern interior staying VFR, as well as areas from Yakutat, eastern North Gulf Coast, all the Panhandle VFR. But you'll see IFR now in northern Cook Inlet, Madanuska, or the Susitna Valley, up to the eastern slopes of the Alaska Range there, and also some IFR showing up Prince William Sound, south side of the Seward Peninsula. And for passes tomorrow, Anatuvik and Adigan, another VFR day there, and for the Alaska Range passes, all VFR, all wide open. In some cases, ceilings visibility is unlimited for rainy, windy. Isabel, Mentasta, staying VFR. And for Tanita, same thing, VFR. But Portage, though, starting to show that moisture slipping on up. Looks like starting out VFR, going marginal. If it goes marginal VFR for Portage, there's always a risk. It could go IFR, but right now just look for a downward trend in conditions. And Chilkoot and White, VFR. Freezing levels, you can see 2,000 to 4,000 feet along the Alaska Peninsula there, and then 6,000 feet there just south of the 4,000 foot line, southwest of south of Kodiak Island. That whole area starting on Wednesday is going to make a push to the north as it gets caught up in southerly flow there. That'll pull it up in the southern interior later on, but otherwise for tomorrow at the surface, now down into Dixon entrance and still north of the Pribilofs. Icing, weak areas of possible elevated potential for some mixed or light rime icing there, eastern Aleutians, Alaska Peninsula, western central Aleutians, and also with that moisture increasing over Prince William Sound and the North Gulf Coast there. And for the jet stream, cold upper level low pulling westward into central Brooks Range there, northern Koyukuk Valley. Southeast flow taking over the eastern Arctic coast, and then mostly westerly flow now, 65 to 80 knots, picking up to northwest 95 knots over the northern panhandle. Upper high pressure over the central Bering Sea, 70 knot southerlies there on the west side of that. Over the western Aleutians, 9,000 feet. Can see the westerly flow across the Susitna Valley and Alaska Range turn south and southeast up over the eastern interior, and then easterly coming back around across the Chukchi Sea. 35 to 40 knot north-northwest winds, mostly off the coast of the Panhandle, 45 knots out over the western Aleutians, and then windier, 35 to 50 knot easterlies over the central interior. And look for moderate chop from the Panhandle up into the east-southeast interior, as well as the Alaska Peninsula, all the way to the western Arctic coast.
Hello again, I'm meteorologist Dave Snyder with the National Weather Service with another edition of Alaska Weather Facts. And joining me today are not just one, but two people, both with the last name Stevens, which is even more fun, but no relation. We have Eric Stevens from GINA and George Stevens, who is a mechanical engineering student from the University of Alaska Fairbanks. Did I get that right?
Yep.
Awesome. And today you guys brought a really cool toy, or I should say tool, with you. It's a sandbox, but why are you guys working on a sandbox?
Well, it's part of our senior design project, and we were approached by EPSCoR to build this for them. They had a proof of concept that they developed about a year ago, I think, and they wanted a more robust version that they could pack onto a plane and take places, and it's a handy learning tool for kids and adults.
So you're a mechanical engineering student. You've built a traveling sandbox for the experimental program to stimulate competitive research, EPSCoR, and GINA's facilitated this. But why do we need a traveling sandbox?
Well, the prototype was such a big hit that they decided they wanted another one, actually two, that they could that would be easier to travel with, possibly marketable even.
Okay, so this is a traveling sandbox that's got a lot of bits and pieces and a computer hooked up to it. What is the computer doing with the sand?
The computer actually uses a Kinect sensor to read the topography of the sand or the shape of the sand, and then the computer translates that into information which it projects using a projector onto the sand, showing topographical lines and which is representative of the shape of the sand.
Okay, so this is a live mapping tool?
Yeah. It's interactive. As you're moving your hands through it, it is actively following and changing the lines to fit what you're doing.
That sounds like something I could have in my backyard.
Yep.
It'd be a lot of fun. So you guys had to change the design a little bit to make this more Alaska-fied, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, how'd you do that?
Well, the original was made out of basically lumber and Simpson strong tie type stuff, and we rebuilt it to make it lighter and basically more transportable. We can pack it down to a fairly small size, and it can be loaded onto a plane and flown anywhere in the state.
Which you guys did today. And you have plans to take this in other places of Alaska, right?
Yep, we're actually going to be headed down to Homer with it later today.
Okay, very good. Eric, how does this fit into science learning around Alaska?
Well, you know what? I think it is a tool and it is a toy. And it brings out a smile from an 8-year-old and the smile from a 48-year-old with that inner 8-year-old wanting to get out. The sandbox, it's an interactive learning tool that teaches us how topography in the 3 dimensions is related to, say, a 2-dimensional map. More about that later. Just like George was saying, it's got a Kinect sensor, not just for video games anymore. It can sense out the lay of the land there, feeds that information in the computer. Computer identifies that, sends a signal to a projector to send topographic lines to map over that lumpy ground. So you get a 3-dimensional topo map out of it. And my favorite thing about it, this is the thing that stops people at the trade show, they stop at your booth and don't leave, is that you run your hand through that sandbox and it responds in real time. It remaps the topography as you get to be Mr. Tectonic Plate Drifter there. You can make things how you want. Well, what if we made a really high mountain here and a low valley there, and the lines adjust to what you did? It's a learning tool because it shows you that connection between these 2-dimensional topo lines and what's really out in Alaska. And Alaska's a place with all kinds of topography. We're from the Great Plains. where topo maps tend to be just like blank pieces of paper. But Alaska is particularly gifted in this regard, and this tool helps us, I think, learn more about our state, really.
Absolutely. And so this is going to enhance STEM learning, the science, technology, engineering, and math, in many different locations around Alaska. Then this would be something that kids and teachers can get their hands on.
It sure is. And I mentioned the it's like fly paper at a booth that, or at the Science Potpourri when we had Greg's original version of this sandbox, and that one was made out of scraps of wood, and it was a prototype. But even that one, before it had some of the refinements that George and crew have made for this newer, upscaled, maybe a 2.0 version of the sandbox, even that one was so attractive to people. It just demonstrated that this has potential to be a learning tool, an outreach tool, an education tool that now is portable and can go places in Alaska. Of course, there's only one sandbox, can't be everywhere at once, but hopefully it gets out there, gets the word out about EPSCoR and what science is being done here for Alaskans.
All right, that sounds really interesting, and I can't wait to get my hands in the sand and try this out for myself. We're going to demonstrate this here in our next segment of Alaska Weather Facts, but before we go, we want to remind you that EPSCoR, which is a new acronym for me now, but I'm going to remember this because you can follow them on Facebook and Twitter, and I invite you to do that. Alaska EPSCoR is also something that facilitates science learning at the University of Alaska around the state, and that stands for Experimental Program to Stimulate Competitive Research. So check that out, and make sure you tune in tomorrow because we're going to have the next version where we actually get our hands in the sand and check out how this works and demonstrates that topography. So for now, I'm meteorologist Dave Snyder with this edition of Alaska Weather Facts, and we'll see you again next time.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back. Looking at the coastal water forecasts for the southeast coast. Gale warnings, Lynn Canal, sustained north 40 knots with storm force gusts of 55 knots. Otherwise, Stevens Passage, small craft advisories for north winds at 30 knots with 6-foot seas. And quite a range in the winds there for Clarence Strait, north 15 on average with occasional gusts as high as 40 knots. Otherwise, the south coast of the Panhandle, outer coastline, northeast winds 25 knots, 7 to 8 foot seas. Gale warnings on the north coast with east winds at 35 knots with 8 foot seas. And moving on to Wednesday, gale warnings continue in Lynn Canal, but lose those storm force gusts there. But look for the winds 35 knots out of the north the entire day. And Stevens Passage, small craft advisories, northerlies at 25 knots. Clarence Strait, north 20 knots with 4 foot seas. And out along the outer coastline, pretty uniform wind pattern, direction, speed, as well as sea heights. East 25 knots with seas running 7 to 9 feet. And moving on to Prince William Sound, northeast winds tomorrow, Tuesday, 20 knots with 3 foot seas. And for the eastern North Gulf Coast there, easterlies at 30 knots, turn northeast 25 for the western North Gulf Coast, back around to the east at 25 for the Barren Islands. Southern Cook Inlet, Kamishak Bay, northeasterlies at 30 knots, seas running at about 8 feet, and north of the Forelands there, northeast at 15. And for Wednesday, no change for Northern Cook Inlet. North winds continue at 15 knots out of the northeast winds at 15 knots. And small craft advisories for the area for Southern Cook Inlet, northeast 30. Gale warnings, Kamishak Bay, east at 35. Southeast 35 for gale warnings for the Barren Islands. And the western North Gulf Coast, small craft advisories, east winds 20 knots, and then southeast 20 for the Middleton Island area. And Prince William Sound, winds will be out of the east at 20 knots with seas around 4 feet. Kodiak Island, on the east side there, east at 20 with 8 foot seas. Chillicothe Strait, small craft advisories, northeast 25 with seas running 9 feet. And then from Sitkinak to Cape Sarachev, Pacific side of the Alaska Peninsula, east winds 25 knots, 10 to 12 foot seas. Bering Sea side of the Alaska Peninsula, about the same there with winds out of the east at 25 knots, seas 6 feet. And Bristol Bay, northeast 30 knot winds will be northeast at 30 knots with 5 foot seas. Look for those to increase just under storm force or full gales for Bristol Bay, right on down the Bering Sea side of the Alaska Peninsula to Cape Sarachev, all east 45 knots, 10 to 14 foot seas. And then Cape Sarachev to Castle Cape, storm warnings with southeast winds at 50 knots, seas 22 feet. And then Castle Cape to Sitkinak, also storm warnings, but easterlies at 50 knots with 24 foot seas. 40 knot east winds for the east side of Kodiak Island, seas up to 23 feet. Chillicothe Strait, gale warnings, east winds 35 knots, seas 14 feet. And a little farther to the west there for the Unalaska Island zone, east winds 25 knots tomorrow. Unmak Island, east winds at 20. Adak and Atka, east-southeast 25. Amchitka Island, northeast at 25, 14-foot seas. While Kiska, to Shimmy and Attu, winds will be north 25 knots with 18-foot seas. Big increase in those winds on Wednesday, almost a storm force, but not quite. North 25 knots from Shimmy and Attu to Kiska with 27-foot seas. Amchitka east at 40. Adak and Atka east-southeast 35 to 40 knots. And east-southeast 40 knots for Unmak Island. And Unalaska Island east-southeast 40 to 45 knots with 13 to 18-foot seas. Southwest coast tomorrow, 25 knots out of the east for the Yukon Delta coast. Kuskokwim Delta coast east 30 knots. East 25 for the Pribilofs. Gale warnings for St. Matthew Island, St. Lawrence Island. Northeast winds at 35 knots. Norton Sound northeast at 30. And those come down a little bit on Wednesday. Norton Sound northeast 25, 30 knot northeast winds St. Lawrence Island. 45 knots out of the northeast for St. Matthew Island. Gales for the Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta coastline, 35 knots along the Yukon Delta coast, east 45 knots, Kuskokwim Delta, and east 40 for the Pribilofs. Beaufort Sea, east side there, northeast 15 to 20 knots, northeast about 15 on the central coast. Brisk wind advisories from about Point Lay all the way down to Wales for east-northeasterlies at 25 knots. Those fall back to about 20 knots out of the east-northeast. From Wales all the way up to the central coast, and then from the central coast eastward to Demarcation Point east at 20. And for tonight, wind chill advisories over a good chunk of interior Alaska to St. Lawrence Island through tonight into tomorrow. Wind chills 50 to 55 below. Wind chill warning for the Arctic coast, winds 70 below to noontime on Wednesday. And a winter storm warning for the southern panhandle tonight for 4 to 10 inches of snow this evening, letting up after midnight. And that's all I've got time for. Thanks for joining us.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.